Many years ago, when I was a young duelist trying to make a name for myself in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, I picked up the Atlantean Mermail deck. This was around 2013 after seeing Billy Brake just come off of a fresh top 4 at YCS Miami. The newly innovated Mono Mermail deck, as it was dubbed, was extremely interesting and something that clicked with me almost immediately. At this point, I had essentially zero accolades to my name. I was just a 13-year-old, and I never even topped a regionals. And the prior year, I'd only been playing Dragon Duels, so it was still only my first time really playing in the big leagues. But with Mermail, I was determined to do well. And in April of that year, I was able to take Mermail all the way to a top 8 regional finish, getting my first regional top ever. But it doesn't end there, as only 1 month later, YCS Secaucus would happen. And my dad and I drove all the way down to New Jersey to play the event. An event that I was really close to topping, but unfortunately it all slipped away. I played versus Patrick Hoban, and this one's a written feature, where I get utterly demolished. And as a kid, I was still not the best at dealing with losses, and I followed that up with the next consecutive loss in round 9. I pushed forward, winning the 10th round, but unfortunately on the last 11th round, I got a draw in time. And what this meant was that I would end slightly out of range to get top 32 at the YCS. And after that, Dragon Rulers and Spellbooks got released, and from that point forwards, Mermail was just not nearly as good. And ever since, I've never really played the deck in a competitive standpoint. But that's not to say I don't love Mermails. They were the first deck I really tasted success with, and the first time I ever really got close to topping a YCS. So when Rage of the Abyss introduced some new Mermail support, I was super excited to try it out. Now, seeing that it had zero success in the OCG did make me skeptical to try it, but OCG and TCG aren't completely analogous, and there are differences. For example, Totally Awesome being banned in the OCG, as well as Max Q being legal, are large contributors to why Mermail probably did not see success there. I figured it only makes sense that if for the upcoming regional in Toronto, it was time to dust off my Mermail deck and see what I could do with it. But before I get into the rest of the video, where I showcase my deck, a standard combo, as well as go into the tournament reports, then please let me know if you want to see more videos like this, where I go to tournaments and give you guys detailed rundowns of everything that happened, both in deck building and the specific combos, as well as play-by-plays and expressing how I think during my games. So with all that said, please let me know in the comments below, but also like, subscribe, and comment for any other sort of feedback as well, even if it is this type of content you want to see, but something specific you'd like to see differently. Now, with all that in mind, let's get into the deck. Alright, so let's go over my Mermail Atlantean deck profile. And before we begin, a couple things to go over. Going into the tournament, my general plan was that going first game 1, I'd be very well off. I could do my initial combos and beat most players pretty easily. However, what I was a little scared of was Molt's Charmy, Perilia, and Fuwalos. Both can be pretty good against this deck, though neither a complete death sentence. However, once both are in my opponent's deck, especially post side, it would be a fair bit of games that I could struggle against those, particularly games where they use 2 on me would be almost impossible. And Perilia is also very good against this deck, debatably even better than Fuwalos, so yeah, I was scared of both happening. So what I wanted to do was build a deck that had a lot of engine in it. That way I could reliably go second into opponent's fields as long as they weren't too powerful, as well as I could choose second to post side by my own accord and be pretty comfortable, as it would mess up my opponent's side plan, as well as I could still go with my general game plan of overpowering them. And that's why some of the ratios and choices you'll see here are very different than other Mermail decks. And with that being my game plan, I also wanted to make sure I didn't play any unnecessary cards for my combos. There are other ways to play this deck, which I'll go on lightly after the deck profile, that I chose not to play because I felt like they're unnecessary. They're win more, if you will. And the cards included in these combos aren't great to draw on their own, even if they are okay. So that kind of goes into how I built this main deck and the side deck. But with that in mind, let's go over the deck itself. So first things first, we got 3 Nephthybus the Atlantean Prince. This is the single best starter in your deck and arguably better than Snake Eyes Ash, which is kind of crazy to say. And this is a card that's been out for almost 10 years. Now, if you're not familiar with this effect, it is that once per turn, you can send an Atlantean from deck to the graveyard as a cost, to then add another Atlantean from deck to your hand, except Nephthybus. So the thing is, ascending for cost is how you trigger all your Atlantean effects, which we'll get to in a second. You play around cards like Vaudeo and Imperm, where if they want to Vaudeo or Imperm this, you're still going to get the bonus effect of whatever Atlantean you sent, making this one of the hardest cards to interact with. But because it's not an on-summon effect, it is weaker to removal cards, where Snake Eyes Ash isn't. Bit of a difference in their card design, but it makes Nephthybus pretty good, especially when you go first and there isn't really any removal that exists that would otherwise stop Nephthybus. Its other effect is that when it's sent to the graveyard as a cost to activate a water effect, you can special summon one Atlantean from your graveyard except itself. This type of effect where you get a bonus effect by sending for cost is what all the other Atlanteans do, and that's kind of the point of this deck. You're pairing ways to send for cost, and then the cards that send for cost. Once you have those two together, you do some pretty powerful things. Prince is kind of at the center point, being very strong in both regards. Now, Prince is one of the newer ones, even though it's 10 years old, because it's not in the initial wave of support, where the other Atlanteans that were released back in 2012 are not once per turn, but both effects of Prince are once per turn. So it is more balanced, I guess, although I'd be kind of hard-pressed to call Prince a balanced card. We got 3 Dragoons to back that up. Dragoons, if you're not familiar, is one of the best cards from the old eras. I love this card, and it's fantastic. So it has some random effects about level 3 lowers being able to attack directly. The important thing here is that when it goes to your graveyard as a cost to activate a water monster's effect, you can add any Sea Serpent except itself from deck to your hands. Any Sea Serpent. So this is where you get Moving Glacier coming in, as well as you can search the Diva and Prince, all that type of things. And it's old, so it's not once per turn, and very, very abusable. Drawing this card is fantastic, and obviously searching it is fantastic, so 3 is an easy choice. Now, where we change up a little bit from the standard is I play 2 infantries. So I'm not sure if this is something that is considered very standard in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Or modern Mermail decks, but I like this card a lot for when I'm going second. And if you watch my testing with Jeff Jones, which is my first time kind of really playing the deck, or playing against it, we noticed that infantry going second was pretty good at forcing out specific interrupts. So I guess if you're not familiar, let's talk about what it does. It is a Sea Serpent as well, that gives you an extra normal summon once per turn when it's on the field, which is nice, but the real reason to play it is that when it goes to grave as a cost for a water effect, you try to face a card, you put controls, and destroy it. This is obviously great for pushing through fields, so you can hit cards like the Sequence attached to Desiree, which would force it out immediately. You can hit Hurricane Sanctuary, but in reality, it's just flexible. It just pops a card. So yeah, very good at hitting face-ups, but obviously not sets. That's what the other Atlantean from the structure deck does, Atlantean Marksman. However, with there not being many sets in the metagame, it's not a card I've included in my main deck. By playing 2 of this, I will see it more often so I can push more aggressively with it. And also, it means that I can discard 1 and have a second one to search off Dragoons or send off Prince later on in the turn to keep playing through their field. Obviously, when you go first this, it's nothing besides a free discard for other of your effects, but I don't think that's the important part. And then there are ways to discard it during your opponent's turn to turn it into disruption. So yeah, I mean, I was happy with the 2 that I played, and I don't think that would change that. Next up is 3 Mermail Shadow Squad. So this is part of the brand new wave from Age of Abyss. And the new cards both say they are Atlantean and Mermail thanks to the first line of text. So it is a Mermail card, but also an Atlantean card. Unlike all the other Atlantean cards, it has an effect when sent to the graveyard as a cost for a water monster. And in this card's case, it special summons any level 4 or lower Atlantean or Mermail from your deck. So it can get Prince, for example, or any of your other level 4 lower dudes, which there's an important one, Mermail Abyss Pike, which we'll get to later. But that's not all, because the other effect, while seemingly unimportant, is actually pretty important. And that is that once per turn, you can discard a card to make all monsters you control level 7. So that sets up your rank 7 plays, because you have a bunch more 7s in the deck, and it means you can do your really powerful rank up plays without needing to have level 7s, and you can force through interruptions that way. Now, next up, we got 3 Abyss Shrine, the Atlantean Spirit. This one, again, also counts as a Mermail card this time. This one doesn't have an effect like the other Atlanteans when it goes to grave for cost, surprisingly, but what it does do is it acts more like a Mermail card, where you contribute this card from your hand and then 1 Atlantean or Mermail from your hand or field to the graveyard to then add or special summon 1 level 7 water from your deck. In this deck's case, you'll be mostly adding it to your hand, so you can then continue the flow of free monsters, although sometimes you will summon. Now, there aren't any level 7 monsters to summon from your deck in this deck that are really that crazy, but I know in other Mermail decks, a popular strategy is to summon Deep Sea King Coelacanth. That card, very strong, can special summon any number of fish monsters from your deck. However, fish monsters are the worst of the 3 typings in the Mermail Atlantean strategy, and you have to go out of your way to play worse fish monsters to make it viable, as well as the Coelacanth itself is a brick. And with the nature of how powerful these combos are, I've decided not to play it as it's unnecessary. I think it's just bricky for no reason, although I know other players do like that combo. But in this case, you're mostly just adding Abyss Teus and Abyss Megalo. This card's other effect is also extremely important because it's a large part of what gives you resiliency to hand traps, board breakers, and just general follow-up. And that is what's in your graveyard during your opponent's turn. You can banish to discard a water from your hand for cost and then draw a card. So keep up some resource advantage, but more importantly, discarding cards on your opponent's turns means you can accrue resources via discarding Dragoons or Prince or Shadow Guards, but you can also discard, say, Heavy Infantry to destroy a face-up card your opponent controls, which is fantastic. It is removal, another layer of disruption, especially when you get, say, Dark Willow Mord and your 2 totally awesomes are turned off. So this card is fantastic as both disruption and a starter and an extender. Very good card, for sure. Next up, we got a classic, Mermail Abyss Teus, and one of my favorite looking ultis, I guess, alongside Dragoons. Wow, this is so awesome. Brings back the good old days. It's a level 7 Aqua, so not a Sea Serpent is important, that can special summon itself from hand by discarding a water monster. Now, this is an effect that reveals itself, so it does start a chain, but by the same logic, it also means it triggers your Atlantean effects, which is important. And then a new chain, once it's summoned by this effect, you can add one level 4 lower Mermail from your deck to your hand. Now, that add effect is once per turn. The special summon effect is not. So when you have multiple of these, you can't keep adding level 4 lower Mermails, but you can keep summoning them if you have more cards to discard. Now, this card is obviously very strong because it just searches your deck for whatever you need. The important thing here is it only adds Mermail cards, not Atlanteans, so it's not going to access Prince, but it can, say, get Shadow Guards, which can get the Prince. And the deck's fluidity is still pretty much there, even if there are some disconnects between the engines. Now, next up is a card that is not considered standard among all the other decks, and that is 2 Mermail Abyss Megalo. This is something that I liked a lot in my initial testing of the deck, although the more I played after the regionals, I found that maybe I'd cut this card to 1. But yeah, I think I still would play this card at least on 1. Now, why do you play this? Well, let's talk about what it does first. It's level 7 Sea Serpent, which is important, that says you can discard 2 cards from your hand to special summon it, and it reveals and starts a chain the same way as Abyss Teus does. And then on summon, via this method, you can add to your hand 1 Abyss spell or trap card. In this case, it'll be the new Abyss equip spell, fresh from Rage of the Abyss. But then its last effect is you contribute a face-up attack position water monster you control, and then this card can attack twice, which can do some lethal pushes, as well as tributing for cost will trigger your Atlantean abilities. So yeah, I mean, looking at this at first glance, it looks like it's pretty inefficient for value. Discarding 2 to summon a monster is pretty bad. Even by old standards, it was kind of iffy, and not a card that really everyone even played 3 of back in the day, something that people trimmed down on as the format progressed. But the reason I'm playing multiple is if my opponent decides to push through my field with Perilias and Fulosses on effect on them, I need to draw into cards that actually extend my plays, because the majority of your cards that trigger your water effects are once per turn or unsearchable, because Teus cannot be searched by Dragoons. And I wanted to give myself a way to search off of Dragoons that meant I could still keep discarding effects and summoning bodies. And Abyss Megalo does just that. Now, the first copy makes a ton of sense, and I think I almost couldn't see playing this deck without this card. Because, yeah, being able to get another copy of a discard outlet, we'll call it for now, via Dragoons is incredibly important, and the only other ones are Teus and Shrine. Neither of these are, Sea Serpents. I think that's incredibly important and applies a lot of pressure. The second one was in case I went Megalo and I wanted to search a second one later, and drawing it is not the end of the world. It's not like a terrible card, it's just not the most efficient value. That being said, searching the equip spell is not bad either, because when you're going second especially, getting all the way to the link 3 usually means you already won the game anyways, and it's not like getting that card is something you'll naturally do breaking the field that often. Now, this is to say there's one other Sea Serpent card you could be playing that would also be okay at triggering your water effects that I'm not playing, and that's Deep Sea Minstrel. A level 3 lets you discard itself plus another water to then look at your opponent's hand and banish a card in it until the end phase. So this will give you some ability going first to play through hand traps to rip it from their hand, as well as to give you knowledge on the matchup and anything else they may have. What I don't like about this card is it doesn't actually put a body on the field. It's not really helpful when you go second. And that was my bigger kind of focus here, is I think the card is just unnecessary when I'd rather have something else for going second. When you draw going first, obviously it's fantastic, and drawing going second is not terrible. And there's a world where I'm supposed to side more of these cards, but given that I was never trying to go first beside that often, I didn't want to include it. And that's why I ended up not playing it at all, and then needing more discards in my deck, Megalo came in to fill the place. As well as this just meant I had more level 7s to force my rank 7 plays, which are very strong, and we will get to that. Well, next up we got 1 Mermail Abyss Pike. Now, this is a card that some people play multiple of, and the reason you play multiple of this is because of Deep Sea King Coelacanth. You'll notice this one is a fish. But it is just an average card to play from your hand, so without this Coelacanth, it's not worth playing more copies of. It's level 4 that says on summon, you can discard 1 water monster to add level 3 water from next to your hand. Specifically level 3, not 3 or lower, so you can't say add Prince or Diva off it. You can add your next card, Mermail Abyss Gun. You can add Shadow Guards, you can add Shrine. So there is still plenty you could do with this card, although it is a little more restrictive and it does need a little more cost besides it. Most of the time I'm summoning this off of my Shadow Guards though when I already have Prince. It's kind of like the backup version to keep the flow of resources going and keep discarding cards. Next up for the one of is Mermail Abyss Gundy. This one acts almost like an Atlantean card, because when it's discarded you can target a Mermail in your grave and then special summon it. But where this card is nice is that it's a Mermail and level 3 water, meaning when you can't search other good discards, you can search this card off of Abyss Teus, or you can search off Abyss Pike. Also, one thing to note is that it's not the same as Atlanteans. This is when it's discarded, period, and it has to be discarded. So if you tribute it for Megalo, it won't work, where the Atlanteans would. Also, if you discard it for, say, a Phoenix Twin Wing Blast, not that I play that card, it would work where an Atlantean wouldn't. But this card is still important for your combo, as well as its decent extension tool, so I have no problem playing the one of this card. And it is recyclable, so I have no need to play more, as it's not a starter, or even the best quality of extender. Now, that's all for the actual Atlantean and Mermail cards. I say that's all, and that's a lot of them, but the rest of these cards in the deck are less direct engine. First up, we've got Deep Sea Diva. For me, this was an easy 3 of, although I know a lot of decks aren't playing this or they've cut down on it. If you're not familiar, it's a level 2 tuner that says on summon, you can special summon any level 3 lower Sea Serpent from your deck. So the main target is very obviously your Atlantean Prince. Being a tuner opens up some cool plays for this deck, but more importantly, it's that it just gives you Prince, and Prince is a broken card. Diva, as opposed to Prince, is weak to Imperma, so it is just directly worse than the Prince, and the combo of the Prince is pretty much just as good as Diva. Like, Diva may add a little bit, but it's not important. And given that, it's not really like Diva's a better card than Prince. In fact, it's straight up just worse. It is, however, more copies of one-card starters that eat my opponent's hand traps, so my more intricate combos can succeed, and I was happy playing multiple copies of it. It obviously is not the best card, and when I'm going second post-side, and I don't want to clog on normal summons while I'm drawing into my 6-card hand rather than 5, as well as drawing cards Puri and Fool Loss, I do slim down on it, but I did like this card, and I thought it was fine, even if it is strictly worse than the Prince. Not like I can play more of this card. The next Sea Serpent I play is Moulin Glacia. If you're not familiar with Moulin Glacia, the Elemental Lord, it is a crazy card. A Sea Serpent, so it is searchable off of Dragoons, that says you have exactly 5 waters in your grave and special summon it from your hand. Then, your opponent must discard 2 cards randomly or their entire hand if it's less than 2. After this card leaves the field, though, you will skip the battle phase of your next turn. But because it says when it leaves the field, if you XYZ with this, you will not have that downside, so you won't be forced to, say, skip your next turn, the turn after you rip 2, so it's your second turn. And that matters because even if you don't play a rank 8, remember, this card will make all your cards level 7. But yes, this card is a huge part of your turn 1 combo, as it is a free body that rips 2 cards from your opponent's hands. I shouldn't have to explain how powerful that is. That's it for all of the main engine in the monster section. So let's keep going to the spells and traps. You see, this is a pretty engine-heavy deck, but you can also see why it extends pretty easily as well. Abyssing Triania is the only Abyss card I'm playing. There are other Abyss card options, but I feel like they're all pretty bad to draw, where Triania is already not great, and just individually not very good. Triania says you can special summon an Atlantean or Mermail from your hand or graveyard and equip it with this card. So it is Premature Burial for all intents and purposes. Non-targeting, which is kind of nice. But then also, if the equipped monster would be destroyed, you can destroy this card instead. So it can be a little bit of protection, something where if you watched my duel video with Jeff, I did make a mistake against this card when we played. Searching this card off Megalo can be pretty good at breaking through field sometimes, as it does pressure your rank 7 pretty easily and frequently, which I think is pretty cool. As well as can be a way of getting your Neptubus through if they say it gets popped the first time. Next up, I've got 2 copies of Deep Sea Aria. A card which I feel like is honestly a pretty low quality extender or consistency card, which is why I maxed it out and I did not ever want to see multiple of. It is a normal spell that banishes a water from your graves and then add a level 4 lower water from your deck to your hand. So, I mean, it searches a lot of cards in your deck, and it really is flexible, but not being able to get a high level monster to keep continuing your plays if you'd say already normal summoned it and already used this is kind of not ideal, as well as there's just not always something good to search for, or there's not always a water in the grave. So for me, this was not something that was super important. I actually don't even know how many times I used this card in the regionals. It wasn't crazy. And then lastly, 1-for-1, because obviously 1-for-1 for Neptubus is like 1-for-1 for Snake Eyes Ash, and I've been a big pusher for that for quite a while. Well, the last engine card in this deck is Virtue Stream. This is a trap card, which I wasn't thrilled about putting in my main deck, but I decided it was worthwhile because it is a very good card, and even going second when you're cleaning up their field and you can't kill them, this is a great way of pushing the game fully in your control. It is a fantastic card. It is searchable, which is important, otherwise I probably wouldn't play it, but it's pretty much Icarus attack. You target a fish, Sea Serpent, Aqua you control, and then 2 cards opponent controls and destroy all of them. Then it has a bonus effect, though, that in the graveyard, you can banish it from the grave to make one of your opponent's monsters water, which may not seem too important, but it can throw off certain plays involving Fiends with cards because they need like Fiends, or even Fire King plays where they need fires. So don't completely underestimate this card's graveyard effect. That is 30 engine cards, which is pretty hefty, but left me with 10 non-engine space, which is not the worst. It does give me some spot to defend myself, especially post-side if I need to add in more cards and cut down some of the starter cards I need for when I went first, like Divas or Arias. The non-engine that I chose is 3 Fuwas and 3 Perilias. I think these make a ton of sense in the deck, as, I mean, obviously Fuwas is broken, but Perilia as well, because for one, it's a water, so I can discard excess copies for Megalo, for Episteus. What's cool with this as well is you can go discard it if you open it, and then use Aria to banish it as your way of starting your combo, which is funny if you ever need to do that. But also, drawing cards in this deck is better than other decks, your opponent can't really afford to just give you 2 draws and end on a half field against you, because you have so many combos and extension pieces that Mermail with a full hand is devastating, especially the amount of extenders that I play. So I felt like these cards really complemented the strategy like very well. Now you can't play too many go-second cards alongside these, so the next ones are better for going first than just these are. Preorder is at least somewhat usable, where Fulos not. Call by the Grave, I figured is fine going second now because it hits Sylvia, hits Fire cards, hits Phantom Yubel, and then in matchups where they're not as combo heavy, which is really all the decks that need the graveyard, we're Call by good against. This takes Centurion where it's not good, at least it's hand traps. And that is important in those matchups too. And obviously when the first card is good. Lastly is Triple Tactics Talents. I can turn them into Link monsters. I can make all them level 7, and then overlay with them, or I can just eat through Interrupt with this card. So the card is very good. Drawing 2, looking at hand, obviously pretty good too. So I mean, nothing to really say. Talents is one of the best board breakers, and I'm not playing a hand trap deck, so I don't want to play more hand traps. Now, Dominus Impulse is a card that works very well with this deck, but I felt like it didn't really fit with my strategy. In the main deck, it didn't make sense, and Talents really complemented what I was trying to do more here. But Impulse is a very good card. You definitely could play Impulse. So that's a 40-card deck. Let's go over the extra deck now. So the most important cards are for sure Bahamut Shark and Totally Awesome. Bahamut Shark being a rank 4 requiring 2 waters, they can detach a material to summon a rank 3 or lower, so you get Totally Awesome. Totally Awesome is saying your opponent uses a card effect, can send itself or any other aqua from your hand to field to the grave to negate that card, and then steal it by sending it to your field. Also, when it goes to the graveyard, add back any water in your grave, giving you both follow-up or disruption by setting up your shrine plus infantry. Yeah, I mean, the card is broken, and this is not once per turn, this is once per turn per copy, so you can go this into this. Also important to note is XYZ's detaching for cost does trigger your Atlantean effect, so making Dragoons for Bahamut Shark and detaching to summon Toad, and then searching is such a clearly broken play that you have to take advantage of it. And this is not a legal play in the OCG, and I think a large reason why this deck may not be succeeding. In the same vein is the next broken water, rank 4, and that is Abyss Dweller. Card is bonkers. If you're not familiar with this card, it just says your opponent cannot use graveyard effects, and that is good enough. Now, next up, we got the Mermail XYZs, Gaios, and Poseidra. Gaios is the least important of them, but you do need it as a bridge. It's a rank 7 that it stops like level 5 or higher from attacking, I think, but also has the effect, the quick effect you can detach to negate the effect of all monsters opponent controls with lower attack than it. The main reason you play is it's a rank 7, 2 level 7s required Mermail XYZ, which Poseidra, which requires 3 level 7s, can rather just go on top of any Mermail. So you go this into this. What Poseidra does is, besides overlaying on top, lets you detach 2 materials and then send any lantern from deck to grave as a cost. So this will trigger Atlantean effects. It also goes through Valor and Imperm, and then non-target return 3 cards the opponent controls to the hand. This is completely devastating. If this card resolves, the game is over, and even if it doesn't, then the search or whatever else you send off Atlantean Poseidra will be fantastic. But also what it does is when it goes to the graveyard, you can discard a card to special summon 3 level 3 or lower Atlanteans from your grave, which is really important for your combos, and it just makes rank 7s crazy impactful. This card is so bonkers. Like, how are Soul Charge and a full board wipe in one card allowed? Next up is Lavirtue Dragon, another rank 3 that is like just customly made. It's so insane. It's a generic rank 3 that on summon lets you add a Lavirtue stream from deck to your hand, which, if you don't remember, is this card, which is why you play it. Very accessible, and level 3s are not going to be in short supply thanks to your Poseidra. But also has the effect that once per turn you can detach material, which will trigger, again, your effects, to then add any water from your graveyard to your hand. So you can get follow-up or add back infantry. Card is very good. Alright, those are the main cards for the XYZs. You still have some other cards, though. First up is Almirage. Almirage is worthless. The reason you play Almirage, I never came up, is specifically for when you open up Diva and you get Valored, but then the next card you have and then you need it to play is... where is it? This card. Because then you need to go turn this into Anima, Banish from Grave, and then search your, say, Abyss Shrine to keep playing. That is the only time these come up, but it was worth playing because the extra deck is not crazy tight. Everything in your deck is waterlocking you. I actually forgot to mention that. Not everything, but there are a lot of cards that waterlock you. All the new cards do this and this. So expecting to be waterlocked, your extra deck is not flexible. Next up is Coral Anemone, the Marincest card, which revives a 1500 or less attack water monster in defense mode to its zone of points 2. Very good card. Abyssalacia is a Mermail Link 2 that requires any 2 of your tri-types, so Fish, Sea, or Aqua. And then in your opponent's turn, you can discard a water to then add a Mermail from deck to hand. This will trigger your effect, so you can discard infantry to pop a card. And this is how you get 2 layers of pops. As well as when it's destroyed, it'll float for your Mermails. Next, we got Mermail King Neptibus, which is another crazy custom card. It is a Link 3 requiring your tri-types, or at least one being your tri-type. And what it does is Anything it points to, so 3 below, like Elf, cannot be targeted if they're water, which is so crazy. On top of that, though, if a card is sent to graveyard as a cost, like any Atlantean, you can then add to your hand from your deck or graveyard an equip spell, or an Abyss equip spell, so it's going to be your Abyss Trienia. And the fact that it adds from grave also is fantastic because it means if you use it off Megalo, you can get it back. Now, one thing I forgot to mention with this card is it may not always be in your graveyard because its graveyard effect is that you can banish it to shuffle back 3 of your tri-types, Aqua, Fish, or Sea Serpent, back into your deck. So you get some follow-up with this card. And then when it dies, it can add neck to hand and Mermail Atlantean. So nice follow-up. Zelantis is very good at water decks. If you've ever played Mermails, you'll know that its effect is you can banish all monsters on the field and then resummon them in face-up, face attack, face defense, or face-down defense. But if you're waterlocked, because you used an enemy or you used one of your Mermail Fish Shrines or whatever, then the non-waters don't return. So if you banish their field of non-waters, they just stay banished. This card becomes a full board wipe, which is really powerful. The last extra card I have here is Chen Ying, a level 10 synchro, which, when the card is banished, can then banish a card in your opponent's field and graveyard, as well as it'll gain attack and lower their attack for every banished card by 100. And if it will be destroyed, you can banish from your graveyard instead. So this is just some extra disruption where you can banish your Abyss Shrine on your opponent's turn, and then you would then be able to banish a card from your field or graveyard. So you just really rip apart what they have. This card I never summoned once, and it's not very important. As well as there's another level 10 synchro you can play either on top of it or instead. That is the Ice Trade one. I just don't have it, and I figured it wasn't important either way. Now this is a 14 card extra deck, and I'll explain why that matters when we get into the actual tournament report. Let's talk about the side deck real quick. Okay, so one problem you may have noticed with this deck is you actually cannot force out back row effectively. The way to pressure back row without SP or Phoenix is to get to a rank 7, which is not that easy to do. I mean, it's not the hardest to do, but it is pretty resource intensive, or Bahamut Shark and get into Toad to protect from a back row. Neither are really too convenient, and both are plays you really would rather force through. You'd rather something else bait the interruption, and then those be the killer plays. So that's why we have Atlantean Marksman here, which when it goes away for cost will target a set card and destroy it. Now, arguably I should have played more copies of this to really hit back row, and it proved to be a problem for me throughout the tournament. As well as I probably could have put more back removal on the side, as I don't have anything else. That was probably a big mistake on my behalf, and something I would change about this deck. But I do think you need at least one Marksman on the side, arguably even the main deck, as it is for sure a blind spot in my deck. Next up, I decided to put some hand traps in for matchups where these cards are very good. Versus rogue decks, Ash and Impulse just kind of end the game. As well as when I knew I was going second, I could silence some of my cards for these. Impulse specifically was a good one to throw in because it's good going on my turn when I go second as well, as it can stop cards like Unchained Solar Rage, it can stop IP Masquerena, it can stop Kirin, it can stop Princess. So it stops a lot of interaction. The Moogle Room is another one it can stop. So this card is very good at pushing my plays through, almost like Call by the Grave, as well as it can be used as a really powerful hand trap. I cited this card more than Ash, but Ash is still very good for the same kind of concept. Dark a little more for very heavy combo decks, especially ones I did not want to choose second against, but I don't know how good this card is. I did get to use it once for Yubel, and that's kind of what it's made for, and it was good versus that matchup, but I don't know if it's better than anything else, or if I should put these back removal cards in instead because they're more important for this covering this deck's weak positioning. And next up versus Tenpai, I feel pretty good when I go first, and when they make me go second, I'm also comfortable. But I wanted something for when I get shifted or like double Pearliad more importantly. So that's why I have 5 cards to end their turn. That way they have to pass back to me and then I can kill them, because I figured that was like kind of the only weak spot in that matchup. And as well, I figured I had the extra deck space, even though I forgot to account for a large portion of my side deck being back or removal. So yeah, this is the side deck. Are things I would change for sure. So some couple notes here. This deck does not play Coelacanth. Already went over that. I feel like it's unnecessary. The other package I don't play that a lot of other Mermail decks do is the Xseed Armor package. So Xseed Armor Fortress, and then Dark Lancer, as well as the Searchable Trap and the Searchable Shark Monster. Those cards extend your turn 1 plays pretty drastically. However, they're not really helpful going second, at least in my opinion, as well as they're bricks. They don't contribute anything when you draw them going first or second either. So with that in mind, the only thing that's going to bolster is your turn 1 capabilities. Is that something this deck needs? No. I'm going to show you the combo of just 1 Prince, how powerful it is, and hopefully that should kind of convey the point of those cards being not really relevant to this deck at all, and something I would not include in any version here. The armor cards more so, and Coelacanth less so, but still, I'm pretty confident that, at least going forward, Mermail decks should be playing pure-ish like this. You don't need more powerful combos. Even board breaker decks will struggle against your combo. So I guess let me show you the combo. So let me show you what 1 Neptibus Prince does. Now I'm going to do this upside down, so bear with me a little bit, guys. Let's start off with normal summoning your Prince. And from the deck to the grave, we can send, not Dragoons, that would be normal. At least that's what you think you do. You send Shadow Guard, special from deck. Then you get to add 1 from deck to hand, so we're going to add our Atlantean Dragoons. This will be my graveyard. And then you special summon from the deck any Mermail or Atlantean level 4 or lower. So we're going to get our Abyss Pike. One thing to note here that I learned from testing with Jeff is when you're going second, you're often not sending Shadow Squad. You want to use your not once per turn effect first before your once per turn effect. So this is where Megalo and Infantry kind of ripping apart the field is more important, and where you send Dragoons if the Neptunus got to resolve when you went second. We went first, Shadow Squad for Pike, Pike effect, then discard the Dragoons, add from deck to hand. What am I adding? I'm adding Shrine, right? Abyss Shrine? Yeah. And then Dragoon effect to add, and from the deck to the hand, I'm going to add the... I like adding Infantry here in case I get stopped. Mooling Glacier is also another option. It's completely fine, though. We'll get to both anyways in a second. One thing to know with the Abyss Pike is it misses timing, because it says when and you can. What that means is if you summon it off an effect, and that effect that summoned it was not Chainlink 1, you cannot use its ability. So say you have Abyss Teus discarding Shadow Guards. If you go Teus 1 and Shadow Guards 2, this card will be special summoned as Chainlink 2, and therefore would not be able to use its effect. So that doesn't matter in this position, but it does matter for some iterations of the combo, and something you have to be careful of because you can really screw yourself up if you don't do that. From this position on, we're going to use the Shrine effect, attributing the Prince off the field to add from deck to hand, a level 7. And we're going to add the Mermail Abyss Teus from deck to hand. You actually need one discard in here in this hand as well, so I'm going to add a Talons for this combo, which is fine, not super important. Prince effect, when sent for cost, will revive the Dragoon. From here, I'm going to overlay these for Bahamut Shark, detach the Dragoons, which will activate. Let's put our graveyard here. And we can summon our Totally Awesome. Dragoon's effect will trigger, and we'll get the Abyss Glacier. Now I'm going to discard the Infantry here. I'm going to add it back later in the combo, which is why I do this, or I can add it off Toad to summon the Prince, or the Teus. Then Teus will get from deck to hand Abyss Gundy. So we have all of this here. Now we have 5 engraved. We can summon this and rip 2 cards from our opponent's hand. This should be in the center column, by the way, the Toad, because it doesn't matter for your arrows. And next we're going to link these 2 away for Coral Anemone. Coral Anemone will then revive from the graveyard our Shadow Guards, Shadow Squad. We will discard a card to make everything level 7. So now we can overlay these 2. For Gaios and then for Poseidra. We're going to link these off for our King Neptibus. It's untargetable now, and we'll discard our Gundy. We get to revive 3 from our grave because we discarded a card to revive 3. So let's revive 1, 2, 3, and then Gundy will revive a Mermail from our grave. And we want to summon level 4 now, so we get the second Toad out. So summon out the Pike. And then because we discarded for cost as well, in the same chain as Gundy, you'll get to add the equip spell. So you get the Premature Burial. Now with the 2 level 3s, we need to make a Lavirtue Dragon. So we can add from deck to hand our Lavirtue Stream. Then I'm going to detach the Shrine, put it back in the grave, to add back Heavy Infantry. So we can discard it with the Abyss Shrine on the opponent's turn. Then I'm going to activate the effect of the Abyss Trienia to revive. I'm going to revive the Dragoons again. And I'm going to overlay these for Bahamut Shark. And then I'm going to put this here. And then use Dragoon's effect. The Toad is not going to be protected here, but I think it's fine. You could have probably put this here and this here, I guess. As better, yeah. A Dragoon effect again is search, because I attached it again. Now once per turn is crazy. And I'm going to add a second copy of Heavy Infantry. Next, I'm going to link away these 2, because I don't need them anymore. And I'm going to summon the Abyss Glacier. This is gone. So what do we have here? We have 2 Toad Negates. We ripped 2 cards from their hand with Mooling Glacier, and because we XYZ'd it away, it is not going to enter next battle phase. We have an Icarus attack to pop 2 on their turn. We can discard a card to search a Mermail, so we can get follow-up. We can add this to then pop any face-up monster with Infantry. We can also then banish the Shrine to draw a card by discarding Infantry and pop another card. So we pop 2 cards there. We have 2 adds for follow-up with this. We're going to have the draw as well. We have the Icarus attack. If this, when you pay a cost for like discard or whatever, you also add this back to your hand. So you're going to be drawing back to like an 8-card hand on your next turn if they play through this. So they have to play through 4 pops, 2 negates, 2 hand rips, and then they have to kill you. Otherwise, you won't have 8 cards in hand. That's not conceivably possible. And if you discard their hand and see it's a graveyard-based deck, instead of the second token, you make Abyss Dweller. So I don't see how you possibly need to make this combo stronger. This is just better than Snake Eyes. Like, I do think this deck overall is maybe less safe than Snake Eyes into hand traps, but the combo's power is certainly not weak. So to play cards that make the power level higher doesn't make sense to me. This is with no other extenders. Obviously there's no hand traps, but what more could you want? You can end on Chending sometimes, Dweller instead, but this is good enough, man. This is more than good enough, to be honest. That was the Mermail deck, and I hope that profile is insightful to you guys, but I know that's not all that there is. Let's go over the actual tournament itself, where I can give you guys some play-by-plays, and you can see how the tournament played out, how my luck was with variance and die rolls, with hands, what led to my defeats, any mistakes I made, and also, given all of the things I talked about here and what happened, what I would have maybe changed with my plays and deck in the future. So, let's go talk about that now. Alright, so day of the regional starts off pretty poorly. I wake up at a nice 4 in the morning, not for an alarm, just because that's unfortunately just when I woke up, and I had nothing to do, so I just did some work and some script writing for you guys while I was waiting for my ride to show up. And then around 8:30, my ride showed up, my friend Assad came, and we headed downtown to play in the regionals. In the car, he gave me some of the cards that he was going to lend me for the event, including Threatening Roars and an Atlantean Marksman. However, he did forget one card, and that is a Marincest Coral Anemone. So at this point, I had a 14-card extra deck, and I was missing my second anemone. I didn't think it was too important, so I decided to say, screw it, and just play with a 14-card extra deck because I wouldn't be bothered with trying to find another coral. Then we make it downtown and head into the Metro Toronto Convention Center, which is a new venue for us. We used to use this for Toronto Regionals and for YCSs a long time ago, but as of recently, they've been in different places. So it was nice to return to this old venue that hasn't been used as often lately. Now, this Regionals offers a pre-registration online, and ironically, that line for confirming pre-reg is longer than the on-site registration. So I didn't sign up online, and I always just show up to sign up there. I print out my deck list ahead of time. I just scratched off my one enemy and went to sign up with nobody in front of me. Showed my belt so I didn't have to pay entry, a cool little perk of being a UDS champion, and then I went to go chill. At that point, I was just resleeving my deck and ready for the tournament to begin, talking to some friends, and I got called up to the main stage. And I'm like, damn, did I make a stupid deck list error? And it was called up, and they tell me, you have a 14-card extra deck. Is this intentional? And I just laughed because, yes, it is intentional. I was just couldn't be bothered finding another enemy. I didn't want to go asking every single person in the room. So, false alarm, and I went to go sit back down, and then we just chill until the event began. Now, the event began pretty promptly as soon as 10 hits, which is great to see. You love to see everything being on time. And now it's time for round 1 to begin. With round 1 of every tournament, or the first round you're going to be playing, it's of course one of the hardest matches of all, because you're fresh off with no kind of practice for the day, at least normally, and the nerves might be higher than they will be until much later when pressure's on. I'm pretty used to this. I play a lot of tournaments, and at this point, I don't get the jitters anymore. Although when I played Mermail 10 years back, I definitely had butterflies in my stomach at this stage. We roll the dice, and I come up short, and I'm chosen to go second by my opponent. Now, but I look at my hands, and I have 2 Fool losses with a Neptibus Prince, as well as a 1-for-1. So I feel confident, as I now have really good sources of disruption, as well as 2 ways to play, so I can't just lose to 1 interruption. My opponent just sets 2 cards and passes, and this is looking great. Now, 2 cards setting a pass doesn't really indicate what it is. It still could be a trap deck like Labyrinth, but many decks when they brick would also do a similar play, and Labyrinth could often just play more back row. 2 is kind of light for Labyrinth, so I didn't get too antsy in trying to confirm what my opponent was playing just yet. I test the waters with 1-for-1, and resolves, and I start doing my combo. And I want to see what he's playing, so the first thing I try to do in my combo and prioritize is Mooling Glacia. Ripping 2 cards from his hand to give me a better idea what's going on. So I summon the Glacia, and I hit a Sphere Mode and a Lady Labyrinth from his hand. That confirms I'm playing against Labyrinth. Now at this point in the combo, I realized I made a mistake. I started off the combo with sending Dragoons instead of Shadow Guards. Now that's because going second, you aren't supposed to do typical combos, you're supposed to play an adaptive way that beats opponent's disruptions. But in the way I did it, what it meant was I had to summon more monsters in order to threaten a Bahamut Toad combo. And into back row, that's exactly what you want to do if they have powerful trap cards. I had no way to kind of force anything out. So I figured, okay, the other way to force out back row is by making the rank 7 Poseidra. So I pressed forward with Megalo and Teus, getting them on the field. But at that point, I get hit with simultaneous equation cannons, and I lose my entire field. But because I knew it was Labyrinth, I made sure to keep follow-up for next turn, and I'm chilling. In the end phase, he summons a second Lady Labyrinth. So at this point, he has just the Lady Labyrinth and the 1 set card. So I'm not too scared just yet, and thankfully he doesn't have a Labyrinth trap face down to continue the pressure. He draws, sets a card, turns Lady to attack, attacks for 3k, and passes. I start playing my follow-up with the goal being to still get to Poseidra as he clears the entire field and then give me the damage needed to kill him. But when I summon my second level 7 once more, I get hit with a second Equation Cannon, and at that point I lack any sort of ability to play, so I just scoop it up going into game 2. Now, side acting for game 2, I obviously just take out my Mole Charming cards. They do very little, and Ash and Impulse are both excellent in this matchup, so I slot them right in. Game 2, I draw Called by the Grave and Neptibus, so I'm feeling pretty good as long as there's not multiple crazy hand traps for my opponents. Draw phase, Dimension Shifter comes down, and I very swiftly Called by the Grave it, get the shit out of here, normal summon Prince, and with no other interactions left, I rip apart his hand with Glacia, set up the negates, and there's nothing for my opponent to do. Heading to game 3, there's only one thing I want to change with my deck, and that is Atlantean Marksman, which can be great at picking apart set cards, so back row, a way of forcing out cards like the Equation Cannon, which can be quite destructive against my deck. I take out 1 triple Texas Talents for it, as a card, while playable in this matchup, is not particularly good, and I press forwards. Game 3 starts and I draw 2 Teus, an Infantry, a Marksman, an Impulse, and a Megalo. It's always funny to me drawing these type of hands, where outside of the 1 Impulse, my entire hand was legal back in 2013. Now, my Labyrinth opponent starts with a set 4 and pass, a lot more closely resembling what I expected compared to game number 1. I start with Teus pitching Megalo and get met with a Power Sync Stone on the reveal. Power Sync Stone, if you're not familiar, is that every time a monster effect is used, you put a counter on the card. And once it has 2 counters, it'll negate every other effect. So with the Teus here, it'll be 1 effect being the reveal on the hand, and then the second effect, the Search and Summon. So after the fact, I will have 0 ability to extend past this. So I summon the Teus, and then the second effect will get Shrine. So now I cannot use effects for the rest of the turn. And the reason I get Shrine here is its graveyard effect can be used on my opponent's turn, allowing me to maximize my number of effect activations by using 2 on each turn, as well as whatever I discard with Shrine will be the second effect to use. And if I have Infantry or Marksman, which I do have each in my hand, I could use those to disrupt my opponent. Shrine also has some decent attack points, so as summoning it, I can press some damage pretty easily. He doesn't do anything to my attacks, which kind of indicates there's unlikely to be a Labyrinth trap face down, which is important because that means that there's no engine for him. And because I have Impulse in my hand, I know that I can also check any single top deck he has. And even if he just has a bunch of traps that disrupt me, if I play a slow game and make sure not to get blown up entirely by resources, I will win the long game. So I just hold on. In main phase 2, I link my 2 cards together for Abyss Glacia. Glacia, like Shrine, can be used on my opponent's turn to discard cards and search new ones. He draws for turn, confirming the suspicion that there's no Labyrinth traps, and sets a card and passes. In the end phase, it's time to take advantage and gather some more resources. I use Glacia to discard Infantry and add another Abyss Shrine. Then the Infantry can pop the Power Sync Stone, and I'm no longer locked under the effect of the stone. Then I can go Shrine, pitch Marksman, I hit the new back row in case it's a Labyrinth trap, keeping him off of Engine. I can just attack with these small monsters over and over again, and he'll lose, or it'll force him to use these traps inefficiently to deal with my monsters. As well as with the Shrine, it'll give me another draw, and I really get farther ahead advantage. I draw a second Impulse, and at this point the game should just be over. The only sort of way he has for recovering would be in the Lab top deck with a Judgment to back it up, as well as me not having anything else to push past whatever other sets he has. But I know I can take it slow from this point, so I just attack and pass here, with a full hand and a lot of options. He sets and passes, and in the end phase, I use Glacia to cycle Shrine for Shadow Guards, and then use Shrine to pitch a Dragoons I draw off last turn Shrine to accrue a ton of advantage. At this point, I have a ton of different cards, and I'm being set up for a Glacia play. So I summon the Glacia to rip the last card out of my opponent's hand, and this alone on field pressure is lethal, meaning it'll be an interruption that needs to be used. So I attack, and the Daruma Cannon stops me, so I'm hitting a powerful card there. And in main phase 2, I normal summon Neptibus Prince, and my opponent goes Solemn Judgment. Now, they may have thought that because of the way I was playing, I had no ability to play beforehand, and that I was just waiting to be unbricked and the Prince was me unbricking. But I wasn't bricked. I was just applying pressure slowly, so they had to use a very neg interaction, Judgment on Prince, where I can still kind of just combo through very freely. I press forward with another Teus, discarding the Shadow Guards. I summon Prince, get some more advantage in some searches, and make Coral an enemy. The plan here is to revive the Shadow Guards and build up into the rank 7. However, I get met with a Solemn Strike on Coral enemy, leaving him with only a single back row left to my 2 impulses, and it's the new back row that is still set. Passion here, knowing I'm still chilling, my opponent is at a measly 50 life points. In the end phase, they use Welcome Labyrinth, and I chain Dominus Impulse. Here I still have a bunch of cards in hand, my opponent is at 50 life with 0 cards playing Labyrinth, and I still have a second Impulse. They draw for turn, set 1, and pass. I draw, flip up the Glacia, attack for game, and when they use Big Welcome, the second Impulse, ensures that the game is over. So with that, we are able to pull out a victory against Labyrinth and start off the tournament 1-0. Heading on to round number 2. I win this roll and I draw Abyss Shrine, Infantry, Diva, Fualos, and Gundy. A hand that is okay. So naturally I start off with Deep Sea Diva and it gets Effect Veiler. So from this point, it is awkward, but I have a play. I pitch Infantry with Shrine to get Teus, and pitch the gun to summon the Teus and then get a Shadow Guard. The gun can then revive the Shrine from the grave. And the game plan here is to go Coral an enemy, revive the Infantry, and then normal summon the Shadow Guard to my extra summon. However, a Ghost Ogre on an enemy ends my turn, as Ghost Ogre does stop an enemy's effect with an enemy requiring the monster to summon to a zone it points to. Without there being a zone resolution, nothing happens. My opponent starts off with Fiendsmith Engraver. I don't concede just yet, even though I have 0 defensive options, as I want to see what my opponent's playing. He goes to the Aerial Eater line and sends Lotus, at which point I know it's over, so I just concede. I know it's Yubel. Now, game 2, I make him start. Now, the goal here is to catch him off guard. Remember, I talked about how this deck is weak to the Mole Charmies, so I wanted to make my opponent start breaking their deck, having bad cards in it, as well as hopefully lowering the end board they have, as they should have sided out some of their greedier pieces for their combos, say an Unchained Trap. I use Perilia in the draw phase, and he goes through a flurry of plays, ending with a Phantom of Yubel, an Unchained Soul of Rage, an Unknown Set, and a Shavara in their hand, which is still pretty good. Now with my hand, I have Call by the Grave, Abyss Teus, Atlantean Dragoons, Dark Little More, Abyss Shrine, and the Quest Spell Triania. A Dark Ruler first, because I figure there's a good chance that my opponent will reset the Rage with Shavara, a Shavara popping Rage, and then using Yama to revive it. But as predicted, he does use the Shavara to try and reset the Rage, so here I'm happy because the play worked out. What you could be thinking is that if they have Chamber, then even after the Yama gets banished, they could still use the Chamber to revive the Rage. And while yes, that is true, at least this way the Shavara would still be on the field. And Shavara, while on the field and summoned from the hand, blocks the opponent out of summoning anything besides Fiends, which means Unchained Soul of Rage can still suck up my monster and make Unchained Soul of Anguish, but it cannot summon SP Little Knight, which in itself would mean additional 2 disruptions. So this does still give me a bit of mitigation in case he has the Unchained Escape face down. But the Calldown Yama does work, and the Shavara comes down with the Rage being gone forever. Next I go with Teus and Dragoons, getting searches for more cards. However, a Veiler comes down on the Teus, slowing me down a little bit. I press forward and Imperm comes down later, preventing me from doing anything too crazy, but because this deck is resilient to hand traps at the point you get bodies in field and you're paying costs, it doesn't matter too much, especially because by making Poseidra, I get to spin his field, as well as pay cost on cards, getting more access to Dragoons, because sending from Deck to Grave is just a cost. They're able to fully clear their field, go Glacia to rip 2 cards in hand, as well as make Dweller to make sure that there's nothing else going to be crazy the next turn. Can't use his Yubel effects, can't use his Fiendsmith effects. At this point, he's top decking to a single card, my copy of Abyss Dweller, as well as I have Abyss Shrine in my graveyard with an Infantry in my hand, ensuring that I can just pop whatever he summons. He does have a Phantom set up in the grave, but if he negates anything and destroys a Spirit of Yubel from the deck, Dweller will stop it from floating. I still feel pretty confident. Draws for turn, can't beat it, and just concedes there. Game 3, I draw a hand that is not far off from what I'd see in 2013 again, of Abyss Megalo, Abyss Pike, Gundy, Impulse, and Triania. So I guess there's 2 new cards there, but still. He starts Throne, sends Spirit, and then has Backing Beast. So from that point, I know my Impulse won't stop him. So Impulse, if they have a hand trap heavy hand, can end the turn, but the other use for it is to hit cards like Sequence, they can't go Desiree, or to use it on my turn to negate cards like Soul of Rage. I negate the Sequence to prevent Desiree, because otherwise Desiree would negate Impulse regardless, and then he ends on Chamber for Rage, Engrave, with a Vardrus on field and a Phantom on field, so still a fair disruption. I drop Perilia for turn, I look at my hand, and I'm like, I don't even have Teus, I don't even have good cards from back in the day, so for this hand, I just call it in, throw in the towel, it's game over. Round number 3. Alright, so now we are in the 1-1 bracket. Now, in order to top this regional, I will have to be X1-1 or higher. It's 6 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw. So I cannot afford to lose for the rest of this tournament if the goal is to top this regional as we did all the way back in 2013. This game starts off with me losing the die roll. Then my opponent summons Death Abyss. Mirror match. My opponent sends Dragoon, gets a Minstrel, then uses it. At which point I chain the Fualos. Fualos at this point though isn't that crazy because it's a combo mirror match, giving me a couple draws to access Dweller should just end me entirely, even if I have a little bit of way to play through it. He looks at my hand, sees I'm playing Mermail, and then gives me 3 draws, but uses Glacia to rip 2 of those away, and then summons a Dweller. So at this point, I'm staying down a Dweller with no other interruptions, a set card, another card in hand, sorry, they have an infantry in hand as well with the Bish Shrine in the grave. So there's going to be a pop, and there's going to be some mystery interaction. But the Dweller is the biggest problem. Now, I draw a turn with 2 Bish Shrines, a Prince, a Megalo, a Dragoons, and a Callby. I'll normal the Prince with the goal of searching another card and then using the Shrine to tribute off the field to summon level 7. And getting to 2 level 7s, I can try to clear the field of Poseidra and get into a grind game with them, hoping they have nothing left. On the summon of Prince, they use the Shrine discarding infantry, and I call by the grave to negate it. I press forward and use the Prince to search. Then I use my Shrine, tributing the Prince, and I get ashed. At this point, the game probably is over, but I press forward anyways, and I try my best. I use Megalo discarding the Shadow Guards I searched, as well as one of the cards in my hand. This other game plan I can do is to go Trienia, revive the Shadow Guards, make everything 7, and keep playing. But when I discard 2 for Megalo, it gets impulsed. And impulse set can be used even if I control no cards, so I still just lose here. And with no plays left, I throw in the towel. Game 2 is a simple one. I start off with 1-for-1, and he has no hand traps, so I full combo, but instead of the second Toad, I make a Bish Dweller, and the game is just very much over. Game 3, I open 2 Fu losses, a Bish Shrine, Dragoon, and Megalo, which is pretty promising. 2 Fu is a solid. He starts off with the Bish Shrine and Dragoons and grabbing Teus and Shadow Guards, which is pretty solid. The Shadow Guards will be the first thing to summon from the deck. He uses Teus and Guard, and then I chain a Fu loss. He thinks for a while before saying it's okay. So I'm kind of thinking here, what if he's thinking about holding the Callby for my turn, or Ash, because it is effective against me, and then just giving me 2 draws for, say, a Dweller, which is not a bad play at all. So given that there's a chance he still has Callby in hand, I decided to hold the second Fu loss here, trying to ensure the first one resolves. Now at this point, if my opponent made a different play, I probably lost the game on the spot. I found out later that he had a Prince in his hand, and if he goes Pike, discard Prince, he can revive the Dragoon for Dweller, and then I probably just can't beat that then and there, and that's only giving me 2 draws off Fu loss. But instead, my opponent goes for a different line, summoning Prince from the deck, and then rather normal summoning a Shadow Guards. He never gives me more draws, and the Glacier does hit my Fu loss, as well as it hits the Deep Sea Aria that I drew off Fua. He then ends with equipping Mizuchi to his monster and passes after adding infantry. So his interrupts will be this Mizuchi here negating one of my spells, and the Shrine discard infantry. I draw Talons for turn, which cannot be used immediately but is still a good card. I'll lead Shrine pitch Dragoons to grab a Teus and Shadow Guards, just like he did. I use those to grab a Bisgundi and a Prince from the deck. And here my opponent uses Shrine discard infantry to pop the Prince. So at this point, I don't really have too much I can do. I can't use Talents, and I don't have that much going for me. So I normal the Gundy and go for an enemy to revive Prince. It resolves, thankfully, and from there I'm able to resolve the Prince, accrue a bunch of advantage, and clear the board in its entirety, as well as end on my own Abyss Dweller that seals the game. Now, at this point, I do recall making a mistake where infantry pop the wrong card, thinking Mizuchi was equipped to something else, but it's my mistake. And what that would let me probably kill my opponent that turn by using Talents. So instead, I use my battle phase to clear the field, and never get to use the Talents to its full potential. But still, with a Dweller and him skipping his battle phase because of Glacia, there's no way my opponent can win, and I do win this on the next turn. Alright, so round 4, and we are back to being positive with our win-loss record, 2-1. I lose the roll, and immediately my opponent says, "You can start." So, I assume it's Tenpai. Pretty fair assumption, right? And I draw a Prince plus Callby, and truthfully, I don't remember what I did, but all I know is he had no interruptions. I hand rip a Hydra and a Regeki. Full combo, and yeah, I mean, this combo is so strong that he can't do shit, and I still win. Now, going to the side, I throw in D-Barrier and Threatening Dwarf for very obvious reasons, because I figure that even if he starts, these cards can be pretty good. In game 2, he does that. He starts. He doesn't want to deal with what I have again. He goes Seals and sets 3 and passes. But then I have a hand straight out of 2012, with Dragoons, Infantry, Megalo, 2 Threatening Roars, and then I draw Prince for turn. But hand is, before that, was something straight out of Secaucus. I lead Megalo, and he chains Barrier calling XYZ, so I can't do any of the absolute crazy stuff in my deck, but I'm still completely fine. It doesn't completely shut me down. I use Infantry to force the Seals, and my Megalo gets bounced, and I grab a Shadow Guard and my Equip spell between the Dragoon and Megalo effects. I'll normal Prince and get some more resources, as well as Shrine, and I get to Glacia rip the last card in his hand. I don't remember when he uses the second back row. What I do remember is at some point he has the Fadra and Chandra on field that he got off the Seals, 0 in hand, and 1 other set card. I go for a call on enemy trying to build up my field and get hit with Imperm as the last card there. I decide to link off my Glacia as is the only other water I have, or to make Zelantis. And because I'm waterlocked thanks to Shrine, I'm able to use his Zelantis, and then his fire monsters do not return to the field. So I pass turn with a Prince in my hand I had for follow-up, as well as Zelantis in the field to his 0 cards altogether, with both T-Roars in my possession. I only set 1 because obviously I don't need to. He just draws and passes, however, and I use my free turn with Prince to set up a Toad and pass back. He draws for turn there and just concedes. Simple game, Tempai defeated. Round 5. I win the dice roll and things are looking up. A normal Prince into the full standard combo, and seeing that he's on 60, when I rip the Branded Fusion, I pivot straight into a Dweller instead of the second Toad. When it gets to his turn, he starts off with Grass, and I decide not to use Toad on it. He just concedes there, saying it was just bait, and under the Dweller obviously cannot do anything, so I'm super chilling. Game 2, I open up double Fuwalos, and when he uses Fusion deployments, it is brutal when I chain them both there. He grabs Cartesia and then fusions into Grand Guignol, dumps 2, and then adds back Branded Fusion with Retribution. He uses the Branded Fusion, and I meet it with Impulse. I draw to 7 for turn with Abyss Pike, Gundy, Neptibus, 1-for-1, Ash Blossom, Dragoons, and Deep Sea Aria. Phenomenal hand. A normal Prince and nothing happens. I continue to just accrue resources and build up what I have. Then I use Abyss Teus, discarding Shadow Guards to summon heavy infantry from the deck, as well as add another Shadow Guards. This also enables a Glacier that I'd set up at this point, and while I'm threatening it, he uses his Grand Guignol on the summon of infantry from the deck off of the Shadow Guards, and summons a Quem. Then he uses Quem to send Elbaz, uses Branded a red to add back the Elbaz, and make a Mirror Jade at the cost of discarding a card for Rebellion. At this point, he has no cards left. Quem revives Cartesia and makes Masquerade as well, so his entire board state is just Masquerade and Mirror Jade. Extra normal Shadow Guards, then pitch another infantry to force the Mirror Jade, while also making my entire field level 7 so I can safely go into Poseidra. He chains the Mirror Jade, but at this point it doesn't matter much. I safely go Poseidra, clear the Masquerade, as well as keep pushing the combo forwards, and I have an easy lethal shot presented. We continue on with the tournament at a nice 4-1 record. Round 6 starts and I lose the roll. I notice my opponent's on 50 cards, so I'm not sure exactly what to expect. Not a deck count I normally associate with anything specifically. I open summon Perulia and I use it. He summons Lacrima, I get a draw, and then he ends on just that card combo. So he ends on Desiree, sets a card, and that's it. At this point, my hand is 2 Megalos, 2 Abyss Teus, a Guns, and Infantry. I lead with Teus here, discarding Infantry, because I thought I just wouldn't use Teus effect to search, but then I remembered that Teus on summon I'm pretty sure is mandatory, even if it is once per turn. So I can go Teus and Infantry to pop and search, but obviously Chain Desiree will just turn off my Teus and kind of validate it. So arguably should have had Megalo and save the Teus for later. Either way, forces the Desiree. And then I use Megalo to come down, grab the Equip spell, and then use the Gun I discarded to revive another Megalo as well that I discarded alongside it. I then go into Poseidra and send Dragoons from deck to grave. This will clear his field. He doesn't use Imprim or anything. And then at this point as well, if I get to use Dragoons and it gets Ashed, I can use the Triania to revive it. And then Megalo still my field contribute the Dragoons to still search and have a normal summoned yet, as well as I'd already have like 7,000 damage in field and the floating effects off of the Poseidra. But my opponent just concedes at this point, so it doesn't matter. I'm still not really told what deck this is. And I think, okay, maybe it's Yubel, the 50 card deck, because I have seen some Yubels go to around 45. And that's how I side. But I draw my hand, and you'd think I may as well have not sided. I draw 0 interruptions, so none of my Ash, Impulses, or Charmies. And he gets to do his combos. But it's not Yubel, it's actually Snake Eyes. And he's playing the Cash Tira version that goes Start Yugioh and all that sorts. By the end of the combo, he ends on the Sylvia Negate with Flamebridge IP, as well as the Silhouette Rabbit, setting up the Angel Statue Azaroon and the Desiree. Pretty good. I draw to my 6th card, and my hand is 2 Infantry, 2 Talents, and 2 Divas. My hand sucks, so I just scoop it up. On game 3, I stick with my game plan, and I choose 2nd. I draw Caught by the Grave, 2 Fuwalos, and 2 Perulias, which can be really good, but when my opponent just passes, I just lose, like, on the spot. I shotgun Perulia, expecting to somewhat play through it, as the deck only really needs to give me 1 or 2 draws to do something through Perulia, and he likely still go through it either way, but I'm not going to chain the second one. He then goes just straight away activate Hollowed Azamina, and I think for a second before deciding, screw it, I'm just going to use the Perulia here, but there's a chance he passes after summoning the Sylvia, at which point I'll have a single draw off the Fua, and then 1 draw for turn to play. Thankfully, Call by the Grave would deal with the Sylvia, so I did not have to deal with that. However, he decides to just heavily play into it and end on the full combo. So he ends on pretty much the same field as last time without the Angel Statue, because he expected to be going 2nd. And I end with 13 cards in hand, drawing to 14. I start with the Abyss Megalo, discarding Infantry to neutralize and bait the Desiree, then force it out as well because he tries to negate the Megalo. I just Talents the Flamebridge, which pushes back the Desiree so we can link it off with SP. Then imperms my Neptibus, and I Glacier up the last 2 cards in his hand. He goes IP SP to stay alive, and then I use Megalo to tributes to threaten lethal on field. He has to chain the SP there, and then I just summon enemy, revive infantry, extra normal Shadow Squad, and he is very dead. Weird, have 14 cards in hand. It's pretty good, right? No. So we move on 5-1. Only 2 rounds left to get our regional top 8. Round 7, I win the roll, and I'm feeling pretty good. Overlooking my hand of Abyss Megalo, Talents, Fuwalas, Fuwalas, Fuwalas. You see, I'm drawing a lot of Fuwalas this tournament, and I'm happy. They definitely help me, but I've also not been great when I draw on wing first, and especially in multiples here. So I have no options. I pass. Thankfully, my opponent passes back. I draw Dragoons for turn, still can't play, and I pass back, because unlike Perelia, Fua is a win. He passes again, and I draw another Dragoons. At this point, he has 3 sets, and I think for a second, I'm like, if he has Call by the Grave for this Dragoons, I get absolutely destroyed. But if he doesn't, then I can win the game here, and I can play through his back row pretty well. Because anyways, what am I supposed to do about Call by? I can't just sit and do nothing. So I go Megalo, ditch both Dragoons, and Call by. So I just attack and pass. He top decks Witch, and I concede. But that is a mistake. You see, I've already gone over it before, and you can kind of tell from my match wins Labyrinth that this deck doesn't have a great time dealing with back row. It's, in fact, kind of bad at forcing out set cards. The only way to do so is Marksman, and at least with my build, it's only post side. It's definitely an oversight with how I built my deck, and something I've already touched upon a bit. So what that means is I should have not conceded when Witch got summoned, because even though it is small, there was a chance I was playing versus Rescue Ace. And it's important to know if I'm playing versus Snake Eye or Rescue Ace there, because while I would have died that turn either way, I could then side more appropriately. Me conceding on the Witch, I sided for Snake Eye, what I expected it to be. Grave mistake. A game 2, I make him start with the same strategy I've been on the entire time. I Fuwalas on his Hallowed Azamina, but then find out it's Race. I impulse the Turbulence in hand to try and prevent it from hitting the field, and Sylvia negates it, at least that's gone, and then he goes Turbulence Effect and sets only Extinguish and Rescue. He sets 1 more card from hand, which I imagine is Emergency because he decided from deck, and he probably just sided out the Contain, and then passes there. However, I have very few ways to force the back row. I lead Shrine Dragoons for Teus and Megalo. I Teus discard Dragoon to get Gundy and Shadow Guard. I normal leave a special Prince, and he lets go through and add more cards. Now, I think this might have been a mistake. Forcing through the cards is really hard because I don't want to summon a Gaios and then get it booked by a Preventer. That is like my biggest fear at this point in the game. So I want to force this stuff. Definitely I think a mistake. I summon the Diva Prince, and I go for my Link 3 Mermail card, which gets banished by SP. I keep pressing forward, and I use Infantry to pop his Turbulence. He chains Emergency for Preventer, tributes the Turbulence off. At that point, I'm like, okay, I'm going to use the rest of my cards to kill the Preventer, kill whatever it summons. Now he can't go Rescue, Revive, and book a monster. But it still leaves me pretty weak, and I have to use my battle phase to do so. And the main phase 2 is I want to finish this off. I go Poseidra to extend my combo and clear the field, but he just goes Rescue, Revive, Hydrant, and then extinguishes my Poseidra, and I can't do anything out. I just couldn't bait it no matter what. So I just ran out of bodies to kind of play with and can't do much what's left over. But he still can. So I just lose there, and nothing I can do about it. Which feels weird. I had a handful of gas into a very meh field, and I just couldn't do anything because didn't have back row bait, didn't even have a Marksman. I'm pretty sure if I just had Marksman, I win that game pretty easily, but without being able to force out the set cards, I just couldn't do anything. So alas, that means the dream of getting top cut at a regional dies there. There's a small chance that XPs make it, but I don't think my tiebreakers are good enough, having lost round number 2. But we press forward, right? See how well we can do. Let's at least go X2 at the regionals and get a bit of Worlds points. Not that I particularly need it, but could be cool either way. I sit down for round 8, still focused on winning this match. I'll lose the die roll once again, but that's okay because my deck is pretty comfortable going second. He starts off with a Memigul Archifiend, and I have to change Food Loss there because I'll be getting a monster to my possession. He then sits a back row and starts using Mech Knight. See someone's Blue Sky, or sorry, Purple Nightfall, and then gets Blue Sky, but not something I expected, and I guess makes kind of sense. Oh, you can set up the zones with Mimiguls, which is pretty cool. And then normal summon an Archifiend to flip out mine, force me to discard a card. I discard a Gundy, so it's the least important card in my hand. They get a draw. Then they go Giant to add room, and then they turn that plus the last mech that they have into Morningstar to have World Legacy Secrets, a Floodgate or Skill Drain-esque trap card that can negate my monsters based on the columns. I draw to 6, but I can't normal summon because they control Mimigul Dungeon, and I control a set Fairy at this point, a Mimigul Fairy. My hand is 2 Abyss Shrine, Prince, Triania, and Shadow Guards, as well as one other card that I don't remember. A Megalo discard Guard and Infantry to pop the Mech Knight he controls, the Morningstar, so that it wouldn't block my zones, and then special summon Prince from my deck. It gets booked by Room though, and he gives a Dragon to my field face down as well. I use my Triania to revive Infantry, and then Megalo attributes Infantry to attack twice, and then the Infantry can pop the Dungeon. A normal summon my Prince. They cost for Dragoons to get other Infantry, but Prince gets negated by Secrets when he chains to revive Mech Knights. I clear up the board a little bit, but I lose to almost all top decks. So normal summons a Mimighoul, normal summons it, but it's more than enough for me to handle, and I just lose in the spots. One thing to know here, though, I don't think I played this game correctly. I think the way I'm supposed to play this game is by flipping up the fairy straight away. I know this would turn off my special summon monsters in the hand's abilities, meaning I can't use my Liz effect if I summon it, but what this would have done is likely baited the room to put it back face down, as at that point, it would lock me to normal summoning. Then my Megalo, discarding infantry, should have not popped the Mech Knight. It should have popped the field spell, because by popping the field spell, I can then normal summon the prince later as a better form of extension. Hard to say if I still would have won, because the game wasn't like that close either for me. I was still behind the entire time. I probably still could have made it a bit closer. But with that said, we progress to game number 2. I normal summon prince, start putting the combo, and through this entire time, he has no hand traps, so it's a decisive victory for me, as pretty much no deck, especially a deck like Mimighoul without much aggressive push, cannot deal with the power of the Mermail combo. Game 3, I go straight into the side deck, and the cards I'm looking for here are Ash Blossom and Impulse. Impulse is fantastic for stopping a lot of cards, but also, if I use Dominus Impulse, then I cannot use the effect of Earth Monster, meaning that all the Mimighouls he gives me cannot activate and return to his field, or give them the bonus effects. I draw my 5 cards, and I see an Impulse, which feels pretty good. He starts off with giving me Slime, and I decide to hold the Impulse. This is almost certainly going to be a better card to use it on, and then he uses Maker. I Impulse it swiftly, and with the rest of his hand, he only has Mimighouls, no Mech Knight cards, and that's really bad for him, as without his mitigation tools for the Impulse, he has very few options. He searches an Archfiend, sets 2 cards, one of them being a room he searches, and passes. And with his only card in hand being the Archfiend, I also know there's just no hand traps. My hand is 2 Dragoons, a 1-for-1, Abyss Pike, and Talons. I flip up the Slime to unlock the dungeon, and my effect can activate here, so it's not a problem. He uses Room to keep me locked, Summoning Master, and Searching. Then I use Talents to draw 2, to try to see any of my Abyss Megalos, Abyss Teuses, or Abyss Shrines to unlock my hand. But I get met with Judgment. At this point, however, he has no set cards, and I know his hand, so 1-for-1 discard Pike ends the duel on the spot. I get to send Dragoons, add a Megalo, as well as add another Atlantean card, and then Megalo discarding the 2 Dragoons, and it's just very, very, very over. And with that, we finish 6-2. The tournament ends with us getting 19th place, which is not bad. Now, the deck performed pretty well, and the strategy going second was very fine. When I went first, it was extremely convincing how easy I'd win, though. Although that being said, there was not a single time I went first and got Molten Charmy, which, where granted I didn't go first post side that often, still made me think, I don't know, like if I got lucky this tournament with going first, or if I really should just be choosing first and not second when I play this deck. Either way, I did all right with Mermail, and I wish I did a little better. There were a lot of things I could have done differently, whether it be in deck building, as well as there were some misplays I made. The biggest one being that I didn't wait to see my opponent was playing Rescue Ace when I played against them. So I can't feel too bad for myself, as it is largely my own fault that I didn't succeed in my game plan today. But I doubt that'll be it for my Mermails. I'm not ready to drop these cards just yet, and we are getting a new wave of support in Supreme Darkness, a wave of support that is pretty good and can help with some of the back row problems, giving us more access to Atlantean triggers, as well as some field removal and level 7s to spam Poseidra. I feel relatively good about what is going to come as far as the water deck in the future. So if you guys want to see more Mermail content on the channel before Supreme Darkness and even after Supreme Darkness as well, then again, let me know. As well as let me know if you want to see more of this deep, in-depth videos where I go over my entire tournament experience, giving play-by-plays in my hands and how I approached each board state. Because if it's something you guys want to see, I can continue to develop and make it better. As well as I can go back and do them for some of my old tournaments that I have better recollections of. For example, even the World Championship. Give you guys a real play-by-play and kind of journey that my team and I had as we tried to accomplish the task of being world champions. It's something I think would be really cool to do, and I see it do very well in VGC, so I'd like to bring that more over to Yu-Gi-Oh as well. But with that said, guys, make sure to like, subscribe, and again, comment down below, and I'll see you all next time.